Okay, welcome everybody. Just to remind everybody, this is a public meeting, and as such, make sure you introduce yourself, which I just forgot. I'm Peter Mason, DDS, do it all the time. So every time you speak, please introduce yourself and where you represent. There is no public speaking part of this, so you're welcome to listen in. If you have any questions, you could go on to the DDS website, and there's an email address you can write to, and we will respond that way. The next thing is the minutes. The minutes were sent out, and did everybody get a chance to review the minutes? Did anybody have any additions, comments, or whatever? If not, somebody can make a motion for us to approve.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Great.
Who was
All
that?
those-
Pat? Mary Pat, was that you?
It was Heather.
Oh, it's Heather. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
All those in favor, either raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes approved. Next on our list, I think you're up, right?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes. All right. So let me pull that up. All right, so I'm going to do a presentation on our new project for transitional housing for independence. And I know at the last meeting, we spoke a little bit about other agencies that had not one house with the little units in it, but had CLA apartments. So it's probably a similar model, but maybe not using the same direction.
So Pam, can I just interrupt? I should probably have started this. So
Absolutely.
This is a unique situation that we have with Pam and her group and her agency. It took us over a year and a half, I believe, to get this approved through DSS. DDS does not have a quote transitional housing program. So basically Pam is blazing the trail. It's still classified under a CLA at this point. I think we're looking at this as to a model that we want to look at, and whether we want to include this as a separate item or just to keep it under the CLA piece to it. So I know she's had some issues trying to build it. We thought we would have been further along by now. I think when we first talked a couple of years ago, we thought this thing had been built, running and showing success. And because of all the issues that have happened, I think she's in the building phase or starting the building phase. So I just wanted to throw that out so that if somebody says, "Oh, I didn't know we had transitional housing," we don't have that. But once again, we're fitting this under our CLA category. Go ahead, Pam.
All right. So I want to start out with just a little overview on what it's all about. So again, like Peter said, we approached DDS years ago, way before COVID, with an option to sell one of our current CLAs that isn't structured in a way to provide for the future needs in a CLA. So it's not built well enough to house people in wheelchairs, so complex medical issues, nor is it built to have the space for somebody with complex behavioral needs and those interventions that you might need space for. So we chose that home because it doesn't really have a future in the CLA world the way we're understanding it in the future. So we developed a model because we have, and I'm sure the providers on each have people in their agency the same way. They've been referred into the current CLA system, and they really weren't fitting into the housing. They were very disruptive to the other people living there. It just isn't working. So we thought with our movement into independent living with assistive technology and this need for people with complex behavioral and or medical issues that don't fit in the current model, that we would try to develop something different. So we hired an architect and we developed a house with the purview that it would do two things for people with IDD. It would help people who are struggling to fit into the traditional group home, maybe have a different model that might work for them. And the main component for us, for people who desire to live more independently, but the teams are unsure that they can do that, or the families are concerned, or they just need more time to learn some, either some of the skills or learn how to interact with the tools that will help them to live independently. This would be an environment that would allow them to learn those skills, having 24-hour staff. So the big safety net underneath as they're learning the skills. We said from the beginning that this setting is not permanent, so it's not a setting for this particular house that somebody would move into and stay there, their lifelong house, but it really is a training ground. So they would move in, they would gain skills and move out to independence, or we would know really what kind of model they needed and they would move to that kind of a model, but they wouldn't stay in the transitional house. So this particular home is designed with 5 studio apartments connected by a central staffing area. So each apartment would have its own living space. We would have 24-hour staffing. We would have all of that individualized assistive technology that was needed per person to do remote monitoring and independent living. Each unit would have a private entrance, and they would use the shared laundry facility in that connecting staff unit. And all units would be handicap accessible. So that is an important point, and I note that because when we were presenting this to DSS, they wanted an alternate purpose for this house. If at some point in the future we were no longer needing this type of house for a transition, who would buy it? What would happen to it? So they wanted it to be handicap accessible so they could then use it for senior housing. So that was their ask when we were going through the project. So the technology used, again, like I said, is designed to support and train people for independence. And it may include some type of remote monitoring system with sensors. It could be motion sensors, contact sensors, panic button, fall pendants. We don't use a lot of cameras, but it could use cameras for training if that was identified. We have used cameras for training, but not really for independent living purposes after they've been trained. Stove and oven safety, face-to-face virtual connections, GPS tracking, medication dispensing system. Some people have PERS system. So it really depends on what they're going to need or what we think they're going to need. And as we're going forward, we're going to be adding or deleting some of that stuff as we identify their skills and how it's going moving forward. So how this model is going to work is DDS Planning and Resource Team Pratt will refer people with IDD to any open studio. The team of that person will meet to decide the plan for moving in and moving toward total independence, or if the one in the studio is for that complex behavioral and medical needs, that would be a different plan or identification going forward. But if it was to move to independence, the team would meet and lay out that plan for independence. And that during that time, a detailed plan with timelines would be created moving forward. So we would be able to have outcomes and report back to the team how the person's doing and are they ready to move out or is it not working for them. If the person cannot thrive in the environment, like I said before, after a 2 to 3 year period, they'll be referred back to a traditional 24-hour setting or an alternate setting identified by the team in the process. So maybe there's another setting identified and created for that person. So this is the architectural design for the house. And so you can see on the right-hand side, on the outside, there's 5 apartments, studio apartments. And that middle connecting area is where the washer dryer and a little staff area. The staff through that middle area have access to all 5 of those apartments to be able to provide immediate staff support if it's needed. We're looking at a location in Portland. We've been looking all over central Connecticut. The problem we're having is, even though it's licensed as a CLA, it is 5 studio apartments, so it doesn't fit under the traditional residential zoning. And we're having trouble finding the right lot of land and the right zoning place in order to build it. So we're going through a special exception process in Portland, and we do have a backup location in Bristol if that doesn't work. But that's been our biggest, after we got through DSS, which was at first our biggest holdup. Once we got through that, the biggest holdup is finding that lot that's zoned correctly for the 5 studio apartments. So we're hoping to break ground in the spring. This transitional house is for ongoing movement from group home living to independent living, like we said before. The conversion of an existing CLA into the same model for permanent living is also on our transitional plan list. So this is the first one that's going to happen, and we have another home that's been identified that will actually be renovated into this type of model, and that will be for people who need that permanent environment. So more behavioral complex needs like that need their own living space but need the 24-hour staffing. So that's the quick purview of it, the plan, and you know, we'll keep you informed as we move forward. Any questions?
Hi, this is Mary Pat DiCarlo from Kennedy Collective. You know, it's interesting how you talked about the design of the building. We have a home. It's 5 separate apartments with like an interior corridor and kind of shared space. Doesn't have the individual exits, but because people that moved in there wanted to stay, it ended up turning into a CLA. So my ideal would be eventually get those people either out of there or they've moved on and go back to the original intent of
Right.
that building, which is exactly what you just described. So.
Yeah, and last week when we were talking, and I can't remember, Mary Pat, I know you had to either jump off or something happened.
Yeah.
We were talking about that really these concepts are not new, they're there. I think it's going to be a lot easier for us to create these types of environments going forward.
Could I ask what the concerns or issues were with DSS?
They just didn't really want it to be a CLA. That was their big thing. They wanted it more to be a CRS or IHS. They didn't want it to be a CLA.
So DSS, it was a lot. DSS is not a very innovative agency.
No.
And so the concept was just over their head. And it took us a while to get us to what the concept was. And once they realized that, then they were concerned about the cost and saying we have to pay for what, 2 separate heating zones, 5 separate heating zones, 5 separate this, 5 separate that. And, you know, what's going to happen from the house that they're moving. And we then had to say, you know, what they're moving from one house, so this is a replacement house. What's going to happen to the house afterwards, and everyone, we just had to keep going through all the different logistics of it. And even in the end, they originally said no, and I had to then go to OPM with a spreadsheet showing exactly the cost, the breakdown of the costs. And one of the things that DSS does not seem to put in their calculation is that they don't pay the full cost of room and board. They somehow keep telling everybody they do, and I had to keep bringing it back that it's based on people's Social Security and what they get, and so the only thing they pay is their state supplement. And when I went through the whole breakdown from what Pam estimates that of people moving out, closing group homes, it was going to save DDS over 5 years, $2 million. In terms of additional cost to DSS with the state sup, we estimated it would cost them another 50,000. So after all this, and I broke this down and I sent it to OPM, they then asked, why is there even a question why we aren't doing this? It's like, yeah. So I think it's a lesson for providers to learn that when they're looking at vacating houses and looking at going others, is always go back to what exactly DSS is paying. And because that breaks it down a much smaller level, because they can say the house is costing $800,000 and this state shouldn't be bearing this cost. But when you break it all down, they may pay 100,000 of it or 200,000. It's not the 800. And it's that kind of logic that providers need to start getting into the mode with DSS, because they keep going on with the 800,000 piece. So but it is a lesson to learn. And so after that, once that happened, we were then able to move them off, and then they agreed to everything else. But it took a while to go through that. We've kind of blazed the trail, but the people that were involved, some of them have retired, so the trail may have to be blazed again if people are looking at doing this. And it was very time consuming. So in terms of a couple of things here, DDS is, as we've been saying, we're willing to change and explore all these different options and stuff. And one of our concerns with the transitional house is the time somebody spends in that house. Not day wise, but in terms of length wise. Because we want to make sure that this isn't a CLA under a different name. I mean, we know that that's the umbrella of it, but it should be this specific criteria for when you go in, this is what we want to see, what outcomes we're looking, what progress is being made. And if that progress isn't being made, then what's the plan? And there should be some kind of time length of how long somebody can be in that house, or else they need to go back to a CLA environment. So we have not gone through that. Basically, we haven't seen that, how this is all going to work. So I don't know if we're talking 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that is. But we need to figure out what that length is so that the house can stay as a transition house. We know from history that DDS sees an opening and then wants people to stay in that opening, and we'll deal with the consequences later. And so it really behooves the provider as well to put down real strict guidelines so that so that the department itself doesn't get in its own way and say, just keep them for another couple of months and just keep them. If you have that hard date, then you can keep that model as the true model that we're looking for it to see if it actually works.
Peter,
yeah.
This is Mary Pat DiCarlo again. Years ago, I worked at Chapel Haven, and this is exactly what Chapel Haven did. The people, to be admitted, you had to meet certain criteria. And the deal was, you're here for 3 years max. And if you're not, then you're going elsewhere. And that's how people rotated through. So they would graduate from the Chapel Haven program, go out then into their own apartments, continue to receive services from the Chapel Haven staff, but under the IHS or whatever. I'm not quite sure that's how they still do it, but it might be worth reaching out to them to see what is their criteria, what do they use an assessment to kind of say who would fit into this kind of program, who would be more successful versus someone else.
Yeah, and I think that's a good suggestion. So we'll try to track that down. We also try to We also don't want to pigeonhole people that, oh, they can't be in there. I don't want us to turn into a mini BRS and say they're not employable. They're not able to live in their own. So, whatever that criteria is, we need to make sure that it's gray enough that people can go in and try this. And then if it doesn't work, go someplace else. I get concerned when we put it too strict that all of a sudden it's only for this certain person, and then we can't fill the spot, and then it's like, well, this doesn't work, and then we'll just fill it as a group home. So I think some of those that length of time is a critical piece to try to figure that out.
Hi, this is Pam Fields from Midstate, and I just wanted to add to that, Peter, that as we've been moving people into independent living with assistive technology, we've been creating a list of like a diagnosis or a behavior that would prevent you from living in independent living. So if you have a behavior where you are going to run out the door and run in the middle of traffic when no one's there, or if you're going to leave your apartment and jump in, we have somebody who jump in a truck and she'd go go off with a truck driver and you'd never see her again. So if you have people that can't be safe anytime alone because of behaviors that would impact them or somebody else, we're starting to list what those are. And those are really, Peter, what we've done is that's the only limitations, because what we say is you can't tech that up. If you have to have a 24-hour staff for those reasons, then you have to have a 24-hour staff. But outside of those behaviors, we always think that it's possible for anybody else. Whether they make it or not is a whole different thing, but it's possible.
Yeah, no, that's a good criteria. But I mean, that's something that, we as a system need to figure out those pieces to it. And once again, it's this is a little bit more innovative and so we want to make sure that we give enough latitude to it to try to make sure it succeeds. Peter, I think you were next. This is Peter Mason. Peter, you're next.
Yeah, this is Peter Engelbrecht from Mark Inc. of Manchester. So I believe you already answered it, Peter, because my question was what was the team thinking of for a length of time in that transitional housing before they go to the next step. So I think it sounds like it's still kind of waiting to be seen as to what that is. Any envisioning though of what you think people may be leaning towards, a year, 2 years type of thing?
From our experience of moving a couple people from group homes into it, what we've seen, it's usually quicker than slower. They either get it or they don't. So we've seen people move out within that 6 months to a year mark. And that's why in the thing we put 2 years, maybe 3. But usually they either get those skills right away or they just don't have, that's what we're seeing, or they just don't have that ability. So you get to, once they're there, you kind of get to see, especially when they're in the environment, they'll start to exhibit behaviors maybe that they've never done before because they have freedom that they've never had before. And those we've seen in the pilots we've done with DDS, where people would do something different. That, like, we had a guy who never left his room at the group home. He never went outside. He never did anything. He moved into his own apartment. All of a sudden he's off wandering around the community. And he was over at the high school watching the marching band and sitting out watching the trucks go by. So we did a little GPS tracking to find out where he was going and was he safe and all of that. But it was just different behaviors that we had never seen before. And I think Eastern Arc experienced the same thing.
Tammy, you have a question?
Yeah, I know someone brought up like Vista. I just want to make sure whatever we're doing, we're figuring out how to do it under the waiver, because there are some things that under Vista and Chapel Haven that we're not able to waiver because of how they're being set up. And if we are going to make these things waiverable, we're going to have to relook at Chapel Haven and Vista to see if we can waiver some of the programs that are very much like this. Dorm-like settings where they're moving out. We just have to be inclusive of the people that are already doing some things like this. I know they're more, from school age on, but I think we have to go back and look at those settings to see if now they are fitting more of the model that we are doing to see if we can now waiver them as well, because I think there's some programs that they have modeled in the past that haven't been able to waiver because they have all of our individuals living together in an apartment complex. And this sounds like we're going to set everybody up in an apartment and we're going to waiver them. Well, if they're already doing it, which is great. I mean, I love the transformation. I love that we're trying to make people independent, but I think we have to look at what's there to make sure we're treating all agencies equal to be able to waiver some of these. I think in
Tammy,
hearing
this is
this,
Peter.
my
Let me just
concern,
Let me just jump in just on that one, so hold on. I think you're right, and that's one of the reasons why we're keeping this under the CLA piece. But I think at some point, if we move that off of CLA and make its own support type, then we're gonna get into the waiver issues and stuff like that. So those are the things we need to consider if we do move it out of this. We're not there yet because this is still in a trial period, so to speak. But I think you're right in terms of that, once it moves into its own category. Sorry,
so
I
the
didn't mean
only
to
other-
interrupt you.
no, that's okay. The other thing is, and this is, for people who don't know, I have a child with a disability. So I'm going to put on a parent hat really quick. If you're saying someone has to gain skills to live independently, my daughter would never live independently because she will never gain certain skills because of her disabilities. However, right now she's being planned for to move into an apartment. So my concern is setting up an environment like this saying, oh, they didn't gain certain skills, so they can't live on their own. Because some people will not have the ability physically to be able to gain some skills. So I just want to make sure we balance that. Because I know I am not I'm not overprotective of my daughter, and I want her to have as much freedom as possible. But I also know that I can't just put her in an apartment. She's going to need supervision, but she'll never be able to put herself to bed ever. But to say she doesn't have certain skills so she can't live on her own, really makes me sad.
Yeah.
Because I have been a parent that has said, I never want her in a group home because it's not her home. I want her to be able to live in a place that's hers, that she feels is hers, that she answers the door, that she decides who's in there with her and who isn't. So I just want to make sure if we're looking at these, which again, I'm fully in support of, that we make sure we're using, that we don't say, well, if they don't have the skill, they can't, we just have to make sure it's being even. So that's all. I'm sorry. So
Go ahead, Pam.
So this is Pam Fields from Midstate, and I'm sorry, Tammy, if I wasn't clear with that or I made it sound that way. We have had several people who didn't have the skills, but we were able to bridge those lack of skills with technology and other supports to allow them. So we had somebody who was able to remain in his own home without people there because he didn't have any of those dangerous behaviors or things that would put himself in danger. And while he was alone for periods of time, we were able to do that through technology. So he was somebody who couldn't take care of himself, couldn't make his own dinner, couldn't really even take himself to the bathroom. And he was able to live in his own family home and stay there through the night when people weren't there. And his sister would monitor it, and she was even out of state, and she was able to manage that for over 4 or 5 years for him until he declined of living in his own house, and he didn't have the skills. So I just wanted to correct that if I gave that impression that we do want people to gain skills or be able to interact with that technology in order to bridge the barriers to create that independent environment. So just wanted to clarify that.
This is Peter Mason. Anybody else have any questions for Pam?
I do, Pam. It's Kathy Kalo. I know that you're looking for the clustered setting. There's a similar project going on in the eastern part of the region. Are you partnering? I know this is sort of like just for my own knowledge. Are you partnering with a contractor for this that is looking to be property manager at the same time? Or are you guys going to be the sole source of oversight and property management and all of that.
For this project, we will be running it like a group home, so we're gonna own it. And it's, and it won't be under property management. When we do different projects, like our Orange project, and that we work with a property management with.
Anybody else? Peter, I see a hand up. I don't know if that's from previous.
No, it's from previous. I'm sorry.
Okay.
How do I turn it off?
Same place you went to put it
Is it
on.
off now? Is it off
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, it's off now. Yes, thanks. Anybody else have any questions? Great. Thanks, Pam. I think we're going to go on now to Betsy Beller of Deloitte to give an update of where we're at. We're trying to get Deloitte, and eventually also McDowell will be coming to the committee as well to make sure that we're bringing our consultants in on the group. So today is Betsy's turn.
Hi, this is Betsy Bella from Deloitte. Thank you, Peter. So we wanted to give you an update on some of our activities.
So Betsy, can I interrupt for a sec? Sorry.
Please.
Maybe people should go around and just introduce yourself and where you're from, since Betsy's new to this. So let's start with Heather.
Hi, my name's Heather Latora. I'm the president and CEO of Marrakesh Incorporated. We're a large organization, and we've been around about 51 years, and we support people in all different ways residentially and day supports, and we also support people through other systems like the DMIS and the DCF system and stuff.
Thank you. Mary Pat?
Hi, I'm Mary Pat DiCarlo. I'm Vice President of the Kennedy Collective. We're an organization much like Marrakesh. We have both residential day employment services and social enterprises.
Thank you. Peter?
Hi, I'm Peter Engelbrecht, Residential Director at Mark Inc. of Manchester, and we have a both day program and residential services, and I'm in charge of the residential services. We serve about 60 individuals across a variety of different programs in residential. Welcome.
Kathy? Hold on, Kathy Kalo. Start off with Kathy Kalo.
Okay, hi, it's Kathy Kalo. I'm the Assistant Regional Director for DDS in the South Region. Nice to meet you.
Kathy Babensky, are you there? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kathy Babensky. I'm a parent of a person with a disability. That's about it.
Tammy?
I'm Tammy Venegay. I'm the Director of Specialized Service Development. I'm out of our central office.
And Pam?
Pam Fields, CEO at Mid-State ARC.
Okay, I think that's everybody.
Betsy Bella Deloitte. Thank you all. Some of your names are familiar. We've touched base in a couple of different ways as this has moved forward, and I'm glad to meet the rest of you finally. So we are, hopefully providers all saw the email that went out on December 1st around the launch of the Moving On program. So Deloitte's providing support to DDS with research, stakeholder feedback, design, outcome-based payment, development for what DDS wants to do moving forward in partnership with providers, individuals who receive services, and families as part of the Moving On transformation to move from more congregate settings to the non-congregate settings as part of the ARPA funds. So those pieces are divided into phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 is fully just folks who are ready to go with how things are set up based on, for example, we heard from Pam earlier, Mid-State's already got some pieces in motion. So other folks who already have plans and programs as they're looking for how do we help move people from congregate to more independent settings, and you're just looking to get moving, that's what phase 1 is about. And then or if you want to start thinking about it now, and then phase 2 will provide a little more guidance, a little more information, still be largely under the existing programs and the existing waiver options, but maybe with some more of those options of here are some things that have been happening in the state or in other states that fall under existing waivers that you might wish to consider. So again, an announcement went out to providers about the transition plan process on December 1st. It included an interest survey. We've had 16 providers representing all 3 regions in the state complete the interest survey saying, yes, we are interested in more information. Half of them said, yes, we are interested in submitting a plan as part of phase 1. Again, it was all regions. Providers representing residential, day, and like many of you on this call, both, and who are interested in restructuring and making changes to services across the board. And then we also had a couple who said, yes, we are interested also in that option of, as people transition to more independent settings, taking where they were and setting it up to serve people who are coming off the DDS emergency list or who otherwise need more behavioral or medical supports than are currently provided in those settings, right? So kind of that shift everyone down the spectrum of independence and inclusion. The transition plan template is something that providers can use as they develop these plans for organizational restructuring and pieces. And it has different documents for each setting. Regional staff will be sharing the documents for the transition plan template with those who completed the survey. Some of you are on this call, so those will be coming soon. I know that people are anxious to see them. We just wanted to make sure that all the folks in EDS leadership who needed to take a look were able to sign off. And then early next year, DDS is going to send out another reminder. There was a deadline shared on the survey for this Friday, but this is certainly not the last opportunity for providers to join phase 1. So there will be a reminder going out early next year to see if there are others who, as they've had a chance to, meet internally, discuss it, are now interested in more information. And then again, phase 2, the hope is really DDS is strongly encouraging all providers who operate congregate day, employment, or residential settings to submit a plan to consider really taking part in this unique opportunity through the ARPA funding to receive incentives to move forward on a lot of goals that we know are shared across the state. Any questions around the transition plan template in that first phase of participating providers? Okay. Seeing none, I'll move on forward. So I mentioned that Deloitte's supporting DDS with research. A lot of this is going into a current state assessment. So we researched the current state in Connecticut. We've actually spoken to some folks on this call related to that. Thank you for that. And DDS selected 5 states for us to look into their services, support settings, and also how they've performed transformation. And those states are Arkansas, Delaware, Maine, Pennsylvania, and Missouri. That might sound like a bit of a hodgepodge collection of states. They weren't selected at random. We spoke with national experts, leaned on experts on our team, gathered an initial scan, and DDS selected based on that. We also received some input from folks in Connecticut. The report looks at approaches to encourage. The report has identified some approaches that DDS can use to encourage and facilitate the efforts of the Moving On program. It does not at this time recommend any new waiver services. This is for a couple of reasons. Connecticut has fairly extensive waiver services. And based on how these services are defined, the identified approaches and some things that come out of other states, they can be waiverable and appropriately implemented within the existing waiver system. This is going to be really great because I think, as a lot of folks are aware, the waiver amendment process can be really lengthy. Especially with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services are really swamped right now because of all the ARPA activity. And they try their best. They are prioritizing these efforts. However, it can take several months. And knowing that we are working within the timelines for ARPA funding set by the Connecticut legislature. Not changing waivers, really let's move forward. Let's providers plan out ahead of time and gives people appropriate timelines that match their person-centered needs, rather than just trying to squish things out with waiver amendments. However, that being said, DDS is going to continue to review and consider suggested plans from providers, and as appropriate, consider waiver amendments in the future. For example, right now, there's a lot of incentive funding available to help support transitions. Those incentives are available through this program and are not going to be repeated indefinitely in the future, right? And so as ideas come to the forefront, as pieces move forward, if there's a new service that can fit under this, but to really be sustainable might be more appropriate as a new waiver amendment, that is on the table potentially. So just wanted to be clear that this is a, thank you, Peter, that this is a ongoing collaborative process. This isn't about the 100 people who are going to transition as part of moving on, and then we're done. It's about how do we create foundations to really expand the range of services that's available long-term to promote independence. So anyway, there's a report with a whole lot of information, and it will be coming out. DDS does plan to share it with the committees, so look for that next month. Any questions around that? It's Betsy Bella Deloitte. Also coming next month, stakeholder input sessions. We're holding virtual sessions with individuals and families, people receiving residential and day services. I'm also hoping to plan a session in Spanish to capture that important and often not as heard group. A group with the DDS self-advocate coordinators, and then a group with providers, both residential providers and a separate session with day providers. And then a group with DDS staff focusing on case managers as well as other roles. These are all coming, as I said, in January. You should be seeing outreach soon. That being said, unfortunately, no one on this call is able to join these sessions. The idea is DDS has been so thrilled to have your input and thoughts through these processes, where we want to make sure that that door is open to hear from additional voices. The Alliance and the ARC of Connecticut are also going to play roles in identifying providers affiliated with each group, to make sure that there is not an appearance or an actuality of DDS selecting the providers who are participating. Sessions are only going to have 20 individuals in them. The idea there is if you have too many people on a call, nobody's speaking up, or you run out of time for everyone. So we're gonna have 20 folks and then use breakout groups as needed to really make sure, especially on calls with individuals and families, that we can move at a pace that's appropriate for the people who are joining and make sure that people are understanding the information and have a chance to speak up, whether that's through chat, text, or verbally. Any questions about the stakeholder input sessions? Pam, I see you've got a hand up.
Yeah, it's actually going back when you were talking before about the this interest survey. You had said, was it 16 providers that answered? I didn't get the number. I'm taking notes. Sorry.
Oh, no, absolutely. This is Betsy Bella Deloitte. 16. So
Okay.
8 have marked yes, we plan to submit a plan March 3rd. And 8 said we're unsure, but we're interested in more information at this time.
Okay,
This
great.
is Peter
Thank you.
Mason. This is Peter Mason, and we're really thrilled that we have that much interest in the beginning. You know, I know there's hesitancy amongst providers regarding the sustainability and the rates. We're being told that the new rates are going to be coming out in January 1st. The idea for those rates is that they are going to be more based on incentivizing the supports that we're looking at increasing. So we're hoping that this will help people in terms of the direction that comes out. To have 8 providers say they would be submitting a plan, is, it's great because we're also looking at this first phase as a pilot. So if we see in that process anything that, didn't work or it's taking us too long, we can kind of readjust that into the second phase. So back to you, Betsy.
Thank you, Peter. This is Betsy Bell Deloitte. Heather, do you have a question?
Yes, thank
Or
you.
comment?
So I just heard that before this meeting at an alliance meeting that we're not going to be able to be part of the stakeholder group, the other group. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get all my questions in now and while you're here. So I'm like, oh, they're coming to this meeting, then we're going to get some time. So I was just gonna ask a couple things, but if it's not appropriate to, that's fine too. But just in general about the process and for our agency. So it's Heather from Marrakesh. I think I said that. We have like a grid of, we serve over 180 people residentially, and right now about I think 32% or so are in like IHS and that type of support. And so we have like a bigger agency goal of moving that to 55% and reducing, and we have been, we closed a group home in May. So we've been doing this and taking people with 7 new intakes for people out of hospitals. So, like we to me, it's just so not clear because we're doing this all the time. We've been doing it. So to come on a transition plan, it sounds like unnatural. It sounds like, well, now I have to force people to do it instead of just our policies, procedures, our DDS caseworkers, everyone's like kind of on the same page with us and being creative. So I guess that's my concern, is that we've been doing it. We do have a big goal, would that translate into one of these transition plans? Like, should we still?
Betsy Bella Deloitte, absolutely. This is a great opportunity for your organization. So it doesn't work, unfortunately, for people coming out of hospitals. They have to be residential wise. If it's a residential program, they have to be in a CLA or a CRS. That's just how the incentives are set up. But within your existing goals, you've already got plans to move folks from these group homes into IHS, other residential settings. And this is an opportunity to receive additional incentives as you do it. So your transition plan doesn't have to be a brand new pie in the sky approach. It can be an opportunity to take advantage of this federal funding to help then be able to invest that funding back into your organization, whether you need it for staff retention, staff retraining, to look into expanding some new options on IHS or obtaining new technology that you haven't been able to figure out how to fund, right? It's really an opportunity. The ARPA funding came out because through the COVID-19 pandemic, it especially hard hit people in congregate settings. And so the goal of ARPA, through the enhanced FMAP focus on home and community-based services, is about how can the federal funding go through the states and get into the HCBS systems and settings. And so I can see how it would sound a little weird, like, why are you telling me to do what I'm already doing? DDS isn't telling you that. What they're saying is there's money available. And all you have to do to access this money is to complete the efforts and make sure you fill out a plan so we can all be formally on the same page.
This is Peter Mason. So Heather, I think we're fortunate on this committee because all the agencies that are on this committee are more forward thinking. That's not necessarily the case throughout this system. There's some people who are very comfortable with the CLA approach. It's very consistent to them, and they have a certain population they want to provide supports to, and don't go anywhere other than that. And so we looked at this as an opportunity to kind of push some providers into this direction, and B, to kind of grease the wheel for those providers who are doing it now, and see that if you're doing it now, you get to keep doing what you're doing and make it more money. And so that's kind of how we looked at it. And if we could get, if, if we speed up some of the things you do and you get to have a couple of extra bucks, great. If we get to have more providers going in this direction, that's kind of what we want to do. We want to make, it's my goal that I'm trying to make this institutionalized, that this is how we're going to do it and keep going forward. And, the department's going to need to figure out what is the future of group homes, what is the proper amount of group homes we should have. I think we've seen it over time in terms of who's going into a group home. It's a lot different now than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Without anything being said, it's being done. And some individuals and providers still have not got that message. So we're kind of making this now a little bit more clearer in terms of what the direction is. This is Peter Mason speaking, there's way too much money tied up into group homes, and that money could be used to help us move provide more supports to more individuals. But because we have these tied up into the bricks and mortar, it's giving us less options. And so we need to figure out how to move from A to B. And this is an opportunity for us to try to start the snowball down the hill. And some people may not like it, and others do. In one of our other committees, there was a provider who actually did not approve of the incentives and basically said no, which kind of blew my mind. And another provider who abstained. It's like, there was no, and I guess that's why some people seem a little stuck, and they'd rather just have the money all go to the rates and keep everything the same. And we're trying to move the system for the individuals and try to figure out how to work with people on the waiting list, because that's always going to be there, and we need to figure out how to provide more supports. So it's a long-winded answer, but that's kind of what we're doing.
Thank you both. It's Heather from Marrakesh. I'm a little confused because you're saying it's not hospitals, so I'm going to say they were all emergency placements, and actually we took someone from the step-down unit as well. So but there's no real, the incentive really, although you're saying it, you said this at the beginning, that we want to take the emergency placement people, but there's really no incentive for doing that part.
So
right?
we've heard some of that, and I guess how we had to justify what we're doing was we need to have individuals move into a more independent setting, and we're incentivizing that. If that then opens up a vacancy that you then fill with a person from the emergency list, that's what we're trying to do. So the incentive is on the individual moving out, getting, once you move them out, we're giving you a lump sum amount to be used as you see fit. And then we're also incentivizing, we're doubling the rates basically for the IHS to help out with that you can use to see you fit. So, and we're also looking at how do we then better support providers who are taking the individuals off, but that's through the rate system that we have to look at how to do that. But we can't, there's no change in the eyes of CMS to take somebody from one place and put them into a group home. That's not a change. So we're trying to do it. And what we're trying to also figure out is, if we are able to move as many homes to providing just medical or behavioral support significant, what's the number of what is the number of homes we would need? You know, and everybody else, as time goes on and people start moving on, maybe not out in the community, maybe passing on. But that opens up and then slowly start trying to move the system that way. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. So it's on DDS to make sure that we're doing something to assist those that are taking it, but that's on the DDS side. It's not on the ARPA side.
Thank you. It's Heather. One more quick thing. I was happy that Betsy mentioned the waivers. We have plenty of waivers and it would be great to be more flexible. And I was partnered with the state with our shared living waiver that I guess we need to, so we are operating some shared living programs now. And I know we have to update those and make them simple and relook at them. They definitely need an overhaul, but we have some nice shared living if you'd ever want to see that, or you needed more information that we run a few.
This is Betsy Bella Deloitte. Thank you. Shared living is certainly one of the things on our radar. So I might follow back up with you at some point, Heather.
Thank you.
Especially because so, you know, there's the reports coming out, and then there's the input sessions. And then the next step after that is, as we move into phase 2, you know, how do you provide the guidance, the information, the materials so that, you know, some of the providers Peter mentioned who are maybe in the earlier process of adapting to this mindset, moving into this, and might need some more guidance, might need some more information, need to know where the blazes are down the path. And so making sure that we're providing materials and guidance and information that allows people to follow that as an agency, to help people transition into more independent settings.
Thank you.
Anyone else? This is Betsy Bell with Deloitte. There was distributed with the provider email also a document called the Moving On Guide. It has details on all the incentives and more information about the program. And it also, that email has an email address that went to the regents. There is an email, CT, I'll put it in the chat, moving on support@deloitte.com. We will be getting technical assistance to providers interested in submitting plans. But if you have questions as we go along, and we will pull DDS in as appropriate for responses as well. I don't want anyone to feel like, since they can't come to the sessions, that they have been locked out of context and information.
This is Peter Mason. Yeah, I mean, we talked about the stakeholder sessions and we know, Heather, we're going to hear from you. We're going to hear from Mary Path. We'll hear from Peter. We're not going to hear from everybody else. And, you know, that's why we're, we know that if you have something, you'll come to us and we'll try to figure out what we can do. There's other providers that may have an idea, but they just go about their merry way and don't say anything. So it's those people we need to try to hear and see what else that we're doing. I don't know if Betsy said this, but DDS isn't going to be part of the stakeholder groups to make sure that people won't have any inhibitions in terms of saying something, whether it's positive or negative. As long as it's about everybody but me, I'll be happy. But we're really trying to get as much input as possible. And there will be, I think we're going to be sending out a survey to providers as well, correct, Betsy? That people will also have a chance to put in their input. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're looking at that in January-ish. Yeah.
Betsy Bella, yes, confirming a provider survey in January, where we would love all of you to respond. So you'll hear more about that. We are making sure we've identified what specific items are being asked in the provider input sessions so that the surveys can sort of cover gaps as well as confirm pieces.
And I've read the state analysis. It's 40 pages long. And those are some of the states that we don't usually hear too much about, which is great. One of the things that some of these were sent to us by providers, and some of them were sent to us through Deloitte. One of the things that we had asked Deloitte was to go out and, we had heard in the past that Connecticut was always seemed to be ahead of other states. And Deloitte came back and said that we are one of the more advanced states. So for us, we then started looking at some of the particular initiatives that each one was doing, that we may be able to use some of those initiatives to assist us to move forward. So we got some small agencies, some large agencies, some in the middle of the road. We were trying to look at states that we probably wouldn't normally look at. So I think it's been a very rewarding process, and so hopefully, when you guys read it, you'll be as surprised as I was. This is Peter Mason. Betsy, anything else from you?
Betsy Bella Deloitte. No, thank you for letting us join your meeting and give an update.
Great, thank you. I think we're to go on to the list of issues. Pam, do you want to cover this one? You're on mute.
Sorry, I was looking while you were talking. Somebody had sent an email that had some additional issues on it, and I don't know why I can't locate that email.
Well, that was
So
that was from Brian, right?
it was from Brian. Okay.
Yeah, let me see. I looked that up.
Okay, I got it.
Okay.
I got it. Perfect. So I figured I would just talk about what he was identifying. And I think I'm just going to open both of them on my screen so I can see both of the issues lists as we go through them. So I'm going to just cover all you guys up and get to his email. So Brian was saying a few questions as a parent, and the numbers refer to the family question list. So that is right here. Do you want me to share that list as I talk, Peter?
Sure.
So people can see which ones he's referring to?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so. All right. So his first items 15 and 16. Okay. 15 is many families are more than willing to provide some financial support and will gladly provide a house for their child. And it talked a little bit about the issues for that. And 16, families that were willing to support or give over their home. And so he was saying, referring to families providing supplemental support or even giving over their homes. Am I correct in thinking that this would be outside of the ARPA funding of transformational housing?
Yes.
And that would
once
be
again,
it,
they're
right?
not there. This is Peter Mason. This is for the congregate settings. They're not in congregate settings already. Now, what I would say is that if we are successful and we were able to move individuals into less congregate settings and more efficient funding settings, that they open up some money in terms of the wait list, which we then could work with parents to do stuff like this. So, there may not be a direct, but we're trying to make it that there's the indirect snowball effect, that we would be able to figure out how to do that. Now, of course, there would need to be some rules regarding how this would work. And we've done this before with parents when they decide to have 3 parents together and they're going to put individuals in there. And that all is good for the first 6 months. And then all of a sudden, one of the individuals does something that the other 2 families don't like. And then it comes down to they don't want to live together, and then who gets what and where. And it becomes, in some cases, has become an ugly divorce. And then DDS becomes the divorce lawyer trying to navigate through it. And so, I mean, there have to be some criteria as we do that. We also have to make sure that we're not setting up many group homes. And, so what does that look like? Is it a shared living type of issue that everybody's providing supports? Or is it, they bring in a provider, they're going to run it, we're just giving them the house, which to me, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and acts like a duck is another name for a CLA or a CRS. So I think it's not that we wouldn't look at that stuff, it's just how it gets done and how is it done so that it becomes between the parents and DDS does not become the mediator of that group. Heather, I think you were first.
So that's like our shared living model, and it's kind of an inverted CCH. So we have families, 3 families that own a house. This is like over 5 years, and they own the house, and there is, instead of an overnight staff there, they live with someone. And so it's the people in that home particularly do need support, but the families take them home on the weekends because we had to run within the IHS rates. So I know it's a little messy, but maybe that's something we could look at more. I think it would be addressed more in shared living, depending on, if we add which we do have some assisted technology, and not staffing. I feel that the staffing schedules are also what we're trying to get rid of. We're looking at a natural way to live, like you have your 4 roommates that live in a place, or 3 roommates. So we do have a family that owns the house for over 15 years, and that's been working too. So it's kind of like an inverted CCH, and we have been able to do that successfully. But I do know there's a lot, if it's not successful, it's a big pain in the butt.
Well, and I think, this is Peter Mason, I think that's the goods and the bad with shared living, is, it's innovative and people working together. Also, it's not so much the bad, but it's trying to fit that into a bureaucracy that loves to have rules and regulations, and DDS wants those rules and regulations. And when you have a program like shared living, it's almost anything goes. And that doesn't always go well with the bureaucracy and trying to and I think that's why we've been so held up on trying to figure out where to go with this, because some of it works, like with you, Heather, but then there's others that go terribly wrong. And that then all of a sudden DDS is in a mess and trying to figure out how to fix that mess, and they don't please anybody and everybody gets mad. And so I see the goods and bads with that. So Mary Pat?
Yep, Mary Pat.
Yeah, hi, this is Mary Pat DiCarlo from the Kennedy Collective. Over the years, I've been approached with the same concept from different families wanting to do this. And one of the things I don't think families really understand, and it's something that we need to do more education around, is one, families think that if they purchase the house or they donate the house, that's the bulk of the expense. They don't realize that if they're not getting DDS funding for the staffing, that yes, they might be able to afford to pay that for a year or so, but that's not sustainable. right? We've also got families that are coming and are requesting to do something like this when their son or daughter does not need a congregate setting. They really need to be in an apartment, and they just can't get past that. They just feel safer. Their child will be safer if it's in a congregate setting. So I think we have to, in response to this question, is we have to do some better education for these families, for them to understand the full scope of the costs of a program like that.
Yeah, this is Peter Mason. I agree. You know, and this shift that we've been doing has been doing it in a slow way, and trying to get families to understand that the group home isn't the all things, everything. It's for a certain group of people, and that certain group of people has now changed. I mean, the individuals that were going in 20 years ago are now individuals that should be in an apartment. You know, what we have now is those individuals are now aging, so to move them out is more difficult because of their aging issue. But we have to communicate that with families and let them know that this is, you know, this is where the department's going, and you know, they've been on a waiting list, and it's almost like you need to start having. This is Peter Mason talking, who's just a retiree and has no say. But it's almost like you need to have two waiting lists. If you want to be in a group home, this is the waiting list for this. And that may be 10 years down the road. If you're looking at going into IHS, then that may be 2 or 3 years down the road. And I think, you know, people may have to make those choices. But, you know, that's not something the department's going to, but I'm just saying in my head, that's where I would think it would need to go. And I think we also, one of the things that we hired was the communication consultants, and one of we want to do is make sure that we're showing the success stories of people out there as to this is an individual who's gone from here to here, this is how they've done it, and this is their lives now. Anybody who's seen some of those stories regarding supportive housing with FABAR stuff, I mean, it's just really unbelievable to see that. So I think there's a lot of communication that needs to be had, and I think, you know, trying us to start putting the CLA not as the gold standard anymore, and trying to, it's just an option for those individuals who need that option.
All right, if there's no more questions, I can move on to the next item on Brian's list. And that was, let me just move this over because I was typing as you were talking, Peter.
Oh.
So item number 20D, looks like CND, refers to NOO for the CLA. Can you explain what this is and if it helps families with children on the wait list? Is it outside of the ARPA funds, or could it be included if funds are available? How would families gain access to these funds? And I just wanted to add, and Peter, I'm sure you're going to jump in, is that I think in one of the previous meetings, we talked that there was going to be an NOO for families coming out. So I'll let you.
Yes, so this is the NOO they're talking about isn't for CLAs. The NOO is for assistive technology equipment. And of course, it can be used in the CLAs, but it's for assistive technology equipment. That will be coming out on January 2nd, I believe, and it will be for provider. There'll be one for providers and one for families. We haven't put a dollar amount to this, and we haven't put a time limit. We're going to try to do this as a rolling thing. We may need to stop it for the end of the fiscal year and open up again in the new fiscal year, but that's what we're trying to do so that we can really move as far as we can with assistive technology and giving everybody the chance for them to do it.
Next question. Sorry, I just want to finish that sentence. Would any of the ARPA incentives be available to families on the wait list or not who represent alternative residential model with or without the support of a provider? Are you going to present the current financial incentive model with approved dollar amounts?
Yeah, no, I mean, once again, this is for congregate setting. So there won't be incentives in terms of that. But one of the things that we are done is a employment network that we're building to help individuals who want to self-hire their own staff be able to advertise for a position and have staff on there that will be able to then they can actually match individuals that help them. And they'll also be as part of the second RFP, which at that point will include DSS individuals that self-hire. That also will be looking at setting up a backup, emergency backup kind of staffing approach. So we may not have incentives for individuals because they moved into this. We're trying to do it on another way in terms of establishing systems to help them to do the self-hire. We looked at incentives for families and stuff, and it's a hard thing to do. Just giving them extra money to do what? And it's basically paying a parent to do something extra. And we weren't able to come up with something that would satisfy us as well as satisfy CMS in terms of how do we give a family extra money to do this when we're supposed to give them what they need. But we know that if people want to do this, the regions should be there to help move this forward.
So those were the only things on his list. I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to add. And then Peter, I know we talked about re-looking at the list and getting the answers that we had down and maybe some that we were looking for and put out of maybe frequently asked questions with these. So is that something we want to work on at the next?
Yeah, I just haven't had time to do that. And it's on my list. I know I started working on that, was trying to get a draft to this committee. I don't think I'll get it for the next meeting because I'm going to be off for the next 2 weeks. So I won't be here to actually do it. But that's on my list is to do that and then get that back to the committee with a draft, and then we could go from there. So I don't know if we'll do it the next meeting, but the meeting after that, I'll try to shoot to get the frequently asked questions.
Okay. Great. So I think, is there any other concerns or topics that anybody wanted to bring up? We have about 5 minutes. I know one of the things, did we want Heather to present her CLA apartment program group next time? Heather, do you want to do that? Okay, so we'll put that on the.
Yep, no problem.
Pam, it's Kathy Kalo. Did CRY come forward with their West Hartford cluster by chance?
I did not see that. Did you want me to reach out to them?
When
I
you
think-
say the cluster, do you mean the supportive
Yeah.
housing?
Yeah, the support, did they come forward with anything around this for their setup in West Hartford is what I'm asking.
They're still waiting to open that up. I think they were supposed to open it up a couple months ago, and because of supply chain stuff, last I heard they were looking at opening it up this month. Now whether they put it as part, they did not, from what I know, I don't think they put in for the transition plan. I think they're so busy trying to work through that issue.
And
I do,
I think referrals was an issue as well, from what I was hearing. And again, I'm not up on the West Hartford area with what they're doing in the West Hartford area.
I
just
haven't
wanted to
heard
know-
anything about the referrals at all, so,
Okay. Okay,
I do know that, in another avenue, I know the person who is overseeing the development, and he's very pleased with CRY and how they're working and how professional they are, so, I know that they've been working closely together, and it seems like it's working well. But in terms of the referrals, I haven't heard anything.
okay, thank you.
You may want to bring that up tomorrow at the ARD meeting and see what the North has to say.
Okay, I'll do that. Thanks.
I do have to go to another meeting, so Dan, do we have anything else?
No, that was the only thing on the list. So we're all set until the beginning of January. I think it's the 5th. Is it the 5th? Let me just pull that up really quick. Yes, it's the 5th at 2 o'clock.
Okay. So just as an FYI, when I come back, as a retiree, we're limited to how many hours we can work in a year. So I'll be down to about 20 hours a week. And so I was at 3 full days. I'm now down to 2.5. And so trying to figure out how to do all this stuff. So bear with me if I don't get back in a timely manner. I'll do my best. So.
All right, thank you. Everybody have a great holiday.
Yeah, everybody have a happy holiday.
Nice
too.
to
Enjoy
see
your-
you. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Peter, take care.